your host, Mae Renfroe. And as always, I'm excited to be able to do these Mighty Mondays because we usually have just really great stories of things my guests have gone through. And today we certainly do again. I have my guest, Esther Stark, on with me. And Esther grew up a chronically shy country girl in Southern Oregon. She has 4 sons, and then her life changed. And now she has really overcome her fears, and she's eventually transformed out of the shadows of shyness and fear into a life of living in the spotlight. So she's going to be talking about her memoir, You Were Shy. So from the shadows to the spotlight. So just a really big welcome, Esther, to this episode of Mighty Monday.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here, and let me share my story with your listeners tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited. With you before, and so it really is quite a story, and the things you went through.
Yes.
But you've got a powerful testimony, so I like that. I like what God does that way.
Thank you. And as you said, God was with me all the way, so it's in there.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
Well, to tell my story, I really appreciate your having me on the show tonight and helping me to spread the word to people. I especially want to speak to your listeners tonight and say I want to ask one particular question, and that is, have you ever felt shy or have you ever felt fearful in your life? Because so many of us have that feeling that just really keeps us bound back from life. We don't get to live the life that we want.
Mm-hmm.
And so often we just stay in that little shadow. And so I want to convince the listeners tonight that it's never too late. It's never too late to dream a big dream. It's never too late to set a new goal. And it's never too late to step out of your comfort zone and out of that little bubble of fear that keeps us locked in from not enjoying the life that we really want to enjoy. And if you wonder what makes me an expert at being able to talk to you, is because I've been there, I've done that. And so a lot of people will say, well, what is shy? What do you describe as shy? And if you were to look it up in the dictionary, it would say something to the effect of the feeling of being uncomfortable, not wanting to step out on anything that might be a little bit risky. But to me, shy is actually translates to FEAR, fear. And the fear really, I was labeled for 4 decades with that little title of shy. And I would hide behind my mother's dress. I would hide behind the school teacher's legs at recess. And 4 decades, I was like that. And for me to step beyond that was really an accomplishment to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that tiny little word, it just seems so little, SHY, but it's powerful enough to control our entire lives. And that's really what it did. It's really what it did for me. And so shy to me is fear. It's fear of being rejected. It's fear of failure. And it's fear of being humiliated. If I do this, will I be embarrassed? If I fail, I'm going to be embarrassed. So when I was, let's see, like I say, I always hid behind my mother, behind my teacher and stuff. When I reached junior high age, I wanted to be like most little girls. I wanted to be a cheerleader, and so I practiced those cheers. I memorized them. I threw my pom-poms in the air, and I just practice. And then the day came that they were announcing the names of the cheerleaders. And as that booming voice came over the intercom, I kind of slunk down in my desk, and a little fear or a little cloud of depression kind of loomed over me because my name wasn't chosen. And I often wondered, though, would I have won if I'd had the courage to try out? But I didn't. I was afraid if I tried out and I failed, I'd be so embarrassed. People would be laughing at me because I didn't make the cheerleader squad. I didn't measure up, and I would feel like, oh, I just didn't measure up to them, and I'm not good enough to be cheerleader anyway. And then came high school, and I was so excited. High school's going to be different. I'm going to go to the games, and I'll be really outgoing because I'm in high school and I'm growing up. And I was all ready. My hair became a little brighter color of brunette, and I plucked those little eyebrows out of there so I didn't have a unibrow in there. And when school started, I was ready. I looked the part, and I was ready to start high school. But the first week of high school was freshman initiation, and then they decided to vote in or elect the class officers. One of my classmates says, I elect Esther Nelson or nominate Esther Nelson for treasurer of the class. And my arm shot up there so involuntarily. I decline, because I was afraid I would lose. And again, I would be laughed at if I didn't make it to the officers in there. So the outside box had changed, but the inside was the same content. It was the same as always. And I missed so many opportunities in my life because I was afraid to step out. I was afraid to take a risk, afraid to take a risk that I might be laughed out or that I might fail or be rejected, as I said. So I just continued on, missing out on things. There's a Reader's Digest quote, if I can remember it here, because I didn't write it down. It's opportunity knocked at my door. By the time I turned back the bolt, unlocked the chain, and opened the door, it was gone. And I can tell you that was my life over and over again. And so many times opportunity was right there knocking on my door, and I didn't take advantage of it. And all out of fear, AKA shyness. So in spite of my being so shy, I did eventually get married. Actually, young. I was 20 years old when I married. But what did I pick? You always hear the phrase, opposites attract. And yep, I married somebody who was opposite than me, somebody that I admired his traits. He was outgoing. He spoke his mind. He was the leader. So he was the leader. I was the follower. We had 4 wonderful sons together, and we were married for almost 21 years, and we relocated. I think I counted it up, 20 places within the first 8 years of being married, that we lived in 20 different cities and places until the kids started to start school, and we really had to stay put. So we actually settled in Boise, Idaho, and we stayed there for about 8 years. But he would jump at the chance that if he had a change and was able to make a change somewhere, he'd jump at that chance. And me being the follower, I just agreed because I didn't have the backbone to speak my opinion, even if I didn't want to do something. I just followed along. So we went through life for almost 21 years, a little bit of a rocky marriage because of all of that. And then on March 1st, 1992, my world changed. An unexpected tragedy snatched my husband's life right out of my world. He had gone through just a real quick synopsis there. In 1982, 10 years prior to his death, he had had an auto accident. was thrown through the windshield of the car, and there's a whole series of miracles that I probably don't have time to go into tonight, but a whole series of miracles that happened immediately after and during the day after that auto accident. But over time, he went back to school. He got a degree, started working. Then the doctors decided he shouldn't be working because his feet swelled and depression started setting in. And so, after 10 years of his really being a very productive person in a wheelchair, he committed suicide. And so, for the next few years,
Wow.
yeah, and it's, with 4 sons, fortunately, I never felt like I was single parenting because my sons at the time of his death were 14, 16, 18, and 19. And so they pretty much took care of mom instead of me
Yeah.
having to single parent for that matter. And having 4 boys, they stepped up to the role of the man of the
Yeah.
house.
Oh,
And so, but for
wow.
several
That's
years,
so good.
yeah, and they were just so wonderful about it. And even today, I have such a close bond with my 4 sons that I just thank God for that. I know so many people have difficulties with their children and or are estranged from their children, for that matter. But I'm so fortunate to have that really close bond with my kids. Matter of fact, my book, um, a couple of them have read it. A couple of them says, "I'm not quite ready yet, Mom," because it'll be emotional for them reading about their
Yeah.
father and about their
Yeah.
father's death. And
Yeah.
so, anyway, during those first few years after his death, I was dealing with denial, with guilt, and with grief and depression myself. I went through a stage of blaming myself for his death. If I'd have been a better wife, if I'd only done that, and if I'd only done this, Satan has a way of pointing that ugly finger, if you would have type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, I got through there, thankfully, with the help of my sons. But while I was going through that too, I really searched the scriptures trying to find peace. I'd been in and out of church because of all of our moves, and I had accepted the Lord at age 13 when I was at a youth camp. But I had been in and out of church because of our moves. And then that last 8 years that we were in Boise, Idaho, I continued to go there. I went morning and night and Wednesday evening and ladies' Bible studies. But at this time, I was really, really struggling. So I was searching the word for a verse or verses to bring me some peace. And I spent a lot of nights on my knees next to my bed, crying and just sobbing. And I would keep going back to the book of Psalms because I related so much to David's cries to the Lord to lift him out of the pit and set his feet on a hard, firm ground. And I just kept asking, Lord, can you get me out of this pit of depression? And one night I was on the floor next to my bed, crying and crying. And I had always felt, but to back up just a little bit, when I was going to church for those 8 years in Boise, I was envious because even though I knew I was a Christian, I would hear people talking about their relationship with the Lord, and I never felt that relationship. I wanted to, and I knew I was saved. I knew if something happened, I'd go to heaven, but I never felt that relationship with the Lord. So as I was going through all of this guilt and grief and crying and sobbing on my knees next to my bed, one night I heard this little voice that says, Esther, get up and go to church. And it was almost sarcastic from my hearing it. I remember, get up and go to church, like feeling sorry for yourself. And the last thing I wanted to do was go to church with swollen eyes and red eyes and tear-streaked face. But I looked at the clock through my blurry eyes, and I knew if I hurried, I'd be able to make the last or the evening service in time. So I obeyed. I went to the service, and the music was already playing. I snuck in the sanctuary door and I sat in the very back row where nobody else was sitting there, with the plan that as soon as it's over, I'll sneak back out the door again before anybody has a chance to see me. So I sat there and I prayed, and the music stopped. The pastor got up and strode up to the podium. And as he got there, he says, I want you to turn your Bibles to Psalms 37:4. And that was the verse that my mind kept going back to. And as I was there on my knees, and I was almost angry, thinking, what does that even mean, Lord? I don't even know what Psalms 37:4 means. And you keep taking me back to that same verse. That Psalms 37:4 is, delight thyself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And so I had asked the Lord, what does it even mean? And so when the pastor got up there and says, I want you to turn your Bibles to Psalms 37:4, boy, my ears perked up there real quick. And I was impatient as he waited for everybody to find Psalms 37:4. And he says, I imagine a lot of you want to know what that even means. So he went on to give his analysis of what the verse meant. He says, God is our Father. And as we are fathers, when our children are hurting, he wants us to climb up in his lap, let him love on us, and trust him to make sure everything will be okay. And that word trust just really kind of stuck in my mind, because I thought, okay, I've been praying and praying, but I think I've been praying more because I wanted God to answer my prayers the way I wanted them to be answered. I wasn't trusting him to really um, to work his plan in my life. And so that night at church, before I snuck back out the door, I rededicated my life to the Lord. And I have to say that that night, when that voice said, Esther, get up and go to church, that was the first time I'd ever felt the Holy Spirit within me. And he's never left. He's never left me there.
Yeah.
So he's always there to encourage me. So I kind of struggled through my depression. I decided, okay, Lord, I need to make a change, and I need your help to do that. I can't go on living in this little bubble of fear that I'm in. And so I remembered seeing, uh, to paraphrase it, a little quote by Donald Miller in his book, Blue Light Jazz. And it's something to the effect of, you can't change the Congo until you know what's wrong with the person in the mirror. And I thought, okay, I know what's wrong with the person in the mirror, but I just don't know how to change her. So even though I am not a big reader, I decided I had to find a way to make these changes. So I started ordering self-help books, lots of self-help books. How to make friends and influence people, the magic of thinking big, speak up, which really was a blessing to me on that one, just a story in itself. But I never did find any how to get over fear books. So all of my struggles there to step out of that were all by trial and error. But I was determined to do it. And with the Lord's help, when I was faced with some fears, I put one toe out of that little comfort zone. And maybe the next time I might put a toe out again. And then maybe I'd put my foot out. And then maybe a leg. And each time I tried to step a little bit farther and a little bit farther. I knew as I did that I was taking a risk of failure. But I decided if I didn't do that, I wasn't going to move forward anyway. So I started realizing that every time I did that, my comfort zone actually stretched a little bit. It was a little easier next time I tried to do it. And it just continued to stretch and stretch. And as my comfort zone got bigger, that little circle of fear started getting smaller. And there's an acronym that a lot of people I'm sure have heard, FEAR, is false evidence appearing real. And I had a lot of
Okay.
that in my life. Yeah, false evidence
Mhm.
appearing real, spelling fear. And I had a lot of that in my life. Low self-esteem, not thinking that I was good enough, not feeling like I ever measured up to everybody else. But with every step that I took, no matter how big or how small, out of that comfort zone, my confidence began to grow. And I want you to know that confidence does not happen overnight, as it did with me, as it didn't with me.
Mhm.
It's definitely a journey or a process that you go through. But as my comfort zone grew and my confidence grew, I began to thrive in a life that I thought I could only dream of when I in my earlier world, because my shy world had always been one of wishful thinking. I wished I could join in. I wished I could be like them. I wish I had the courage to do that. But with the comfort zone being expanded, I became a little more outgoing. I began to join in a little more, and I began to enjoy my life. So the first time I ever really stepped out of that comfort zone enough that I really noticed the difference was I had joined a singles group, a Christian singles group at my church, and we were all in our 40s. Maybe there were a few 30 somethings, but I mostly observed. I had trouble participating still. And we served dinner for Thanksgiving on Friday after Thanksgiving Day. Our singles group served dinner to the members of the church on a Friday afternoon. So as we were cleaning up, I decided, okay, I have a lot of leftover dessert at home. So I asked the people that were working on each side of me, would you guys like to come over and help me clean up the leftover desserts? Sure, we'll do that. And of course, inside I was fearing they might say no, they have things with family to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they showed up at my door, and for the next hour, my doorbell rang, my doorbell rang, and my doorbell rang. And people would say, is this where the singles are meeting? And over the next hour, I had 22 people show up. And as it turns out, in that particular group, if you invited the singles, unless you specified else elsewise, then
Mhm.
everybody just assumed that it was for the whole group. And I thought that was
Mhm. Mhm.
wonderful. I loved having 20 some people in my house. Again, I mostly observed, but it was a step in the right direction. And my house actually ended up becoming the revolving door for our singles groups. Most of our game nights were at my house or other activities. I had
Mhm.
an above ground pool and I had a large enough yard that we could play volleyball and I had a hot tub. And so it kind of became the hub of our singles activities. And that did a lot for my confidence and
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
knowing that I started realizing people actually like me for who I am. It's okay to be me. I continued to stretch my comfort zone a little bit. And it was really hard when I realized if I don't start learning to go on vacation by myself, I'm going to spend all my vacations alone. Because when
Mhm.
you're single, not all your friends who are working and your family can spend the same vacation days that you can. So I took the opportunity to first, just for a weekend here, a camp trip for myself, and then maybe a week. And I started expanding it a little bit and learning to take vacations on my own. One year, I took my bicycle and my jet ski, the stand up jet ski I had, and my kayak, and I went down to Redding, California, where it was going to be 110 degrees. I love the heat. I live in Yuma, Arizona now,
Okay.
but I grew up in Oregon where it was
Yeah.
cold and wet all the time.
Yeah.
So I took this stuff down there, and in the mornings before it got hot, I would go on a bicycle ride. And then in the afternoons, I would either kayak on the Sacramento River, or I would take my jet ski up to Whiskeytown Lake and spend some time on the lake up there. In the evenings, I usually had fast food because I don't want to go into a restaurant alone. But there was one night that I actually challenged myself. Okay, I'm going to go in this restaurant and I'm going to be alone. I made sure I took a magazine so that I could be reading the magazine before and during my meal. And the only time I had to make eye contact with anybody was giving my waitress my order. So, but that was a bit of a stretch out of there, but I did it. And afterwards, I did that a number of other times, just learning I can do this. I don't have to look at people, but I can do this. One day, though, as in the afternoon, I took my jet ski to the lake and I was cooling off. And as I came into shore, there is this young boy, probably age 15, that was standing on the shore. And when I pulled it up on the bank, he looked at me and he says, "Oh, that looks so fun." And so that reminded me that when my son was 13 years old and we went on a weekend camp trip with my boss and all the employees at the engineering firm I was working for at the time. And one of the guys had taken his stand-up jet ski, and seeing the envy in my 13-year-old's face, he showed him how to ride it and let him spend a little time out there in the water. So I thought I have to pay it forward. So I asked this 15-year-old boy, I says, "Well, do you want to give it a try?" And I think his voice hit a soprano note when he yelled, "Sure." And I says, "Well, ask your parents. And if they say it's okay, I'll take you out and show you how to do it." So we went out there, and after a little bit of instruction, he was off and on the lake and just going all over the place, having a wonderful time. I have since wondered, did that instill in his life the love for water sports like it did for my son? My son now has a ski boat, he has a river boat, and he's got all kinds of motorized toys, rock crawlers and razors and the whole bit. But I wonder if it really instilled in this young boy's life a new love or a new passion. And there's another quote that I love, and it says, "Everything we do, good, bad, or indifferent, sends a wave rolling out of sight to a place that we may never see or we may never feel. But that one gesture may change someone's life forever." So I think about that, would that have changed his life? Yeah. And there
Mhm.
was, it had brought back another little scenario in my life because when I was in high school and being so shy, this teenage boy was talking to me and he kept staring at my face as I'm talking, and I was really uncomfortable. And I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, I didn't ever notice it before, but you have buck teeth." I was horrified. I made my way out of there and into the bathroom, and I was crying. And I looked in the mirror and I
Mm.
thought, I didn't know I have buck teeth. Now I know. And that boy's comment affected me the majority of my life. I never smiled again without cupping my hand over my mouth. Anytime I smiled, I would cover my smile.
Mm.
And it wasn't until
Wow.
I was, yeah, I was just so self-conscious of my smile.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't until I was in my 40s again, all this is again then during this transformation time, that I was chatting with an elderly gentleman in the grocery store. And at the time, he said something that was so funny that I spontaneously laughed without covering my mouth. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Young lady, you have the most beautiful smile." And I thought, "I do?" And I decided, I live my life on what this boy told me in school. And now this elderly, wiser guy is, is saying I have a
Yeah.
beautiful smile. And so I
Wow.
started the process of breaking the habit. And it was hard to break the habit. Don't put your hand up there, Esther. Don't put your hand up there. Sometimes I would kind of tilt my head down or something. But I started the process of breaking that habit. And now it's not uncommon for me, if somebody sees a picture or something, for me to hear, "Oh, I love your smile," or "There's that beautiful smile again." But you know what I realized was a smile isn't the structure of your teeth or the way you do the smile. The smile really is the personality that comes out of it that makes your smile valuable and makes it a beautiful smile
Wow.
or not. You can see the most gorgeous Hollywood straight teeth smile, and if their personality doesn't match it, um, it's not a beautiful smile. So yeah, so that was another thing that really kind of helped to change my life. And I started making stepping beyond my comfort zone my life goal. And in 2014, I met the love of my life. I remarried then. I got married in 2015. I'd spent a lot of years single. A few areas in there I'd like to erase out of my life, but I continued trying new things. And when I remarried, I retired that same year and I had more time to start seeking out some of the hobbies I'd had. I actually started learning to play guitar. I'd had a guitar in my closet most of my adult life, and my new husband played guitar. So I did that for a while. I was learning a lot of the chords, and I realized my hand fit better on a ukulele. So I switched to a tenor ukulele and started learning how to play the ukulele. I started watching the University of YouTube, as my husband Sean likes to say, and taught myself to paint. And so I became an artist and have sold a lot of paintings. And I even teach paint and sip classes when people finally convince me to do something. Each class, I always think, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But when I see the smiles on those faces that they actually can do this, it always encourages me to do it again. Quite often I hear the phrase, "Oh, I'd love to take your class, but I can't even paint stick figures." And I usually tell them, "That's okay, because we're not going to paint stick figures. So you can do this. It's like painting by number, because I'm going to tell you what to do." So I became an artist. My husband was an avid karaoke singer. He loved singing, whether it was at home or we'd go out to venues. With a lot of prodding, I finally became a singer. And most recently, the last couple of years, I led music at church, was their music leader. And so imagine that. I not only stood in front of the crowd, but I actually sang in front of the crowd. And now I sing in front of groups of probably 250 people. So I really
Wow.
want to I really want to stress it's never too late to start doing something again, because my husband and I started a karaoke business in our 70s. And
Oh,
we we
way to
have it here at our
go.
park at least twice a week
Yeah,
on or twice a month, I
yeah.
mean, on the patio here in the warm Yuma weather, and we'll get 150 to 250 people. And so I'm comfortable singing
Wow.
there. And we do an assisted living that we go to, and we were doing the VA's hospital there for a while, just taking it there just to entertain more than anything. Most of them don't sing along, but they love to listen and sing there.
I can
So
imagine.
yeah, and so it's never too late to start something new. And when I see somebody sitting there fidgeting or not making eye contact or staying away from the social crowd, my heart just breaks, because I recognize all those signs. I felt them. I know what it feels like. And so
Mhm,
my desire is to convince people that God made us all equal. We don't need
mhm,
to be afraid of anything. None of us are more valuable than that, or any more special than that person that's right beside us. And so I mentioned the acronym of fear, false evidence appearing real, but there's two other acronyms for fear that I really like. There's one, FEAR, forget everything and run. So when you do that, you're going to stay right where you are and you're never going to move forward. So I like to challenge everybody to do the next one. FEAR is face everything and rise. Because when we learn to face it and take that step of faith, then we start to rise out of that comfort zone. So it was in November of 2024 that I published my memoir. And as you said, the title is You Were Shy, From the Shadows to the Spotlight. And you can guess where the name came from, because now when I mention to people that I was really chronically shy, everybody always says, you were shy? They just can't hardly believe that. So I wrote, I wrote my story in hopes that I could inspire other people to step beyond their comfort zone and get out of the shadows of their fear. And now I feel like God's actually encouraging me to take my story on the road so that I can try to help others who may be suffocating in that little bubble of fear. So I want to just give a couple of the scriptures that I really love. And one of them, in this, I feel like relates to our stepping out of our shy zone, is Joshua 1:9. It tells us, be strong, be courageous, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So get that word, wherever. And so that word, wherever, means even beyond our fear zone, even beyond our comfort zone. And so God's telling us that. The other one is Philippians 4:13, where he says, it says, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Then we can rely on Jesus to give us the strength. If we're really fearful of stepping out of that zone, just say a prayer every time we want to make that step. Just give me the strength, Lord. As you did before we opened up here this evening, you prayed, give her the strength to get through this. And I so much appreciate that. And then one more, Jesus encourages us in Isaiah 41:10 that says, fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am God. I will strengthen you. I will uphold you with my right hand. So my encouragement to step out of the comfort zone, I believe that we all can do that. And whether you're a believer or not, whether we rely on Jesus' strength or not, but I believe that us who are Christians, who are believers, have that one extra advantage, is that we can rely on our Lord to help us with that strength where we really need it. So to hear my full story, you were shy, from the shadows to the spotlight. It's my story of being chronically shy, and I tell the stories of my transformation and where I am today. So it's available on Amazon, Kindle or paperback, either one. And so this evening, I really want to encourage all you listeners that it's never too late. And I'd like to see you start getting out there and taking those steps, just one step at a time, one toe at a time, if that's what it takes, one foot at a time, one leg at a time, until you move totally out of your shadows. Or even if you never get totally out of those shadows, every step you take gives you a little more freedom to enjoy who you really are. And somebody once told me, but I think I have the shy gene. And I said, I do too. I can't say I got over being shy. I can say I learned how to step beyond my shyness, and I learned how to step beyond my fears, because there is time now and then when I want to recoil back into my comfort zone. maybe somebody will invite us to do something, and I only know one person out of a group, and I might kind of hem and haw about going. And my husband always says, Esther, you do that every time. And you know when you go, you enjoy it. It's fine. I'll go. And I always do. I always enjoy it.
Yeah.
So the process isn't going to happen overnight, but my desire
Yeah.
is that, because if you encourage yourself to just take that one step, that it won't take you as long as it took me, because I learned it all on my own, trial and error. One step forward, two steps back, two steps forward, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, only one step back, until I finally got to that part in our lives. And I just really want to thank God for where He has me today, because I feel like I thrive in the world that I'm in, and I am not stretching that comfort zone. It was a stretch for the comfort zone to be on here tonight, and taking my story on the road is a stretch of my comfort zone, but it's all to the glory of God. So with that, Mae, I'll turn this back over to you.
Well, thank you so much. That is wonderful. You had so much great content. I just love that, what God can do. And you took the chronically shy country girl and turned your story around, and you can do that for everyone listening. And you were right, it's never too late to start something new.
Never too late.
For that, it's never too late for that fresh start. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being on
Thank you
your
so much.
podcast tonight. So, okay.
Yeah, you take care, and everybody, I hope you have a really good
Yeah.
weekend. Okay. All right. Take
Everybody
care.
out there, good night.
Yeah. Good night.